Praise God from whom blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above you, heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Have you ever seen the wonder in the glimmer at first sight? As the eyes begin to open and the blindness meets the light. If you have soul, sing. I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the wonder in the air of second light? Heaven come out of the water with the old one left behind. If you have soul, say, I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace. I see the world in gospel. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the wild, turning wilderness to wonder. If you have soul, say, I see the world in love. I see the world in freedom. I see the Jesus way. You're the wonder in the wild. You're the wonder in the wild. Turning wilderness to wonder. I see the world your way, and I'm not afraid to follow. I see the world your way, and I'm not ashamed to say so. I see the Jesus way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Oh, I say, I see the world in grace. answer me from where the thunder hides. I cannot run this heart untethered to. With every step I collide with you. Like a tidal wave crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You cannot fail. The only thing I found is through it all, you never let me down. You don't hold back, relentless in pursuit. At every turn, I come face to face with you. Come on, sing it. Like a tidal wave crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You surround me, you chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you let go me found? You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you let go me found? You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? Like a tidal wave crashing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. His love is fierce. Your love is fierce. You never let go. Your love is fierce. Even now you surround me. Your love is fierce. Always, His love is fierce. Come on, lift up shouts. Great is His love. Great is His love. Great is His love. It never fails. It never fails. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. Still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. And you've never failed me yet. And I never will forget. You've never failed me yet. And I never will forget.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. I'm at the foot of the ladder. The limb footbeds are only impressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hello, my name is Mark Lucenius. Welcome to 938 Online. It's Memorial Day weekend. One is different than any other than I can remember celebrating. No baseball or parades or parties. So I'm here at the Brandywine Battlefield Park to remember. On September 11th, 1777, the largest and the longest battle of the Revolutionary War occurred right here. The British General Cornwallis had sailed from Manhattan all the way down to Elkton in order to then march up into Philadelphia where the Continental Congress was gathered. George Washington met the British in battle along the banks of the Brandywine River, and in fact it was right here at the Brandywine Friends Meeting House where the battle turned against Washington. The British troops outflanked Washington right here, and Washington's troops were forced to retreat. The forces led by the Polish General Casimir Pulaski held off the British troops to allow many of the others to escape and fight another day. It was a dark day for America. Many had died and the economy was struggling terribly under British tariffs. There are many conflicting opinions as to what to do. It feels like today though, doesn't it? My father was a Marine and he served until retirement, and he taught me to honor heroes. And I like to pause at monuments and battlefields like this because it reminds me that heroes rise up in the darkest of days. Battlefields and war monuments, they're a complicated thing. Having a war monument in the first place means that we live in a dark world where arms have been taken up against fellow humans. And yet, a war monument also tells us that in the times of darkness, men and women rise up as heroes. Our challenges are different, but the darkness is still the same. It is the same darkness that comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and divide. But God's people have always emerged to rise up against such darkness. And I'm proud of the heroes in our community who serve in the nursing homes, the hospitals, those in leadership making difficult decisions, those keeping the economy rolling, those homeschooling children while maintaining a job, and those reinventing education on the fly. So many heroes in big and in small ways. I'm proud of the dozens of people in Project 938 who have chosen to take a positive step going deeper in their faith, choosing to experience more of Jesus and extend ourselves towards others through this challenge. If you haven't started deeper, a 45-day challenge yet, I encourage you to go to our website and sign up to do 4 simple practices to go deeper in experiencing God in your life in our community. Many of our people find unique ways to serve and creative ways to serve our community. Now, we do this 938 online as a worship experience. Worship in some ways is like a visit to a monument. Praise becomes a protest against the darkness and the brokenness of this world. And it also is a reminder to us that we have a hero that lives. No matter how dark the days turn, we have one who stands in the middle of the storm, stands in the middle of the battle, and has our back no matter what. When we come together in these broadcasts, we seek to fulfill our mission of helping people find their way back to God. We sing of Jesus, our hero, and doing so, we protest the darkness and claim the great hope we have in our leader and our Savior. My hope today is that you get a fresh view of Jesus in your heart and mind, one that gives you a boldness to rise up against the spiritual darkness of this world. That you will have a love to show towards others with whom we share this world. If you are new and want to connect to 938 in some way, we invite you to send a text message to the number on the screen, 97000, and just type new to 938 in the message, and we will give you a way for us to connect. If you'd like to do that in person, we have a call afterwards called Meet 938, where I will be on the call as well as other team members, and we'd love to have an opportunity to meet you. You can just do the Zoom call and you can sign up. You can sign in however you like. And in a few moments, we are going to have a great song that I hope will get in your head all week long. Then KG, our youth pastor, is going to tell an amazing story about a man who met Jesus. But before that, I want you to hear from Rachel, and she's got a few stories of what God has been doing in the midst of our people. We're so glad that you're here. Let's have a great time worshiping together.
The psalmist writes that a righteous man is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaves do not wither. And as many of you know, we are celebrating 17 men and women who are just like that tree. They have gone through our 10 weeks of Rooted, which is our on-ramp to a small group, and they've been studying God's Word together, building friendships with one another, and I was able to celebrate with them just last week what all God has done over the course of the past 10 weeks, and it was just really cool to hear stories. And one of my favorite takeaways was one of the guys in the men's group said that as he continued to show up each week, even when he didn't feel like it, it was like God began rooting in his heart how necessary it is to build relationships with other people who are seeking to know God and seeking to grow in their faith. And it was like something inside of him just clicked. And I think so often that's what happens with faith, is that something inside of it, when we experience faith, something inside of us just clicks. Sian Wofford, who's one of our women's small group leaders, put together this bamboo plant for all those who finished the 10 weeks of Rooted. And what's really cool about a bamboo plant is that with a little bit of water and a little bit of care, this bamboo plant will last for years. And that's how our faith is. With some water, with some care, our faith remains alive. If you've never been a part of experiencing a small group and building relationships with other people who are seeking to grow in their faith, we would invite you to join us for Rooted this summer. We are launching another round of Rooted this summer in late June, and our new pastor of outreach, Josh Crum, is leading a group. This group is for men and women. We would love for you to be a part of it. Josh is super excited about it, so definitely, if for nothing else, just sign up to hang out with Josh. He's a pretty cool dude. And for those of you who just finished Rooted, way to go.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes,
Good morning, Project 938. My name is KG. I'm the Kids and Youth Director. And it's my belief that there's two kinds of people in this world. Some are like my wife, that they just wake up, and this is wild, but they just wake up and they can just see everything. They just see absolutely clearly. They have perfect vision. It's like they're watching the world in 4K definition. And this blows my mind because never in my life have I been able to just wake up and see. Without these things, I'm just completely blind. I can't make out a face that's 4 feet in front of me without these. It's kind of like viewing a Zoom call when both of you have terrible Wi-Fi connection and everything's pixelated. That's how I see the world. And here's some images. An artist recreated some images of what it looks like for people that need glasses or contacts to be able to see. And for some of you, this is a really strange phenomenon. Some of you really resonate with that because you just view the world like I do. I have a -7.5 prescription in both eyes. It's one of the worst I've ever met. The only person I've ever actually met that has a higher prescription than that is my little sister, Leah. She has a -10 and -11. She can't see a thing. And then there's other people in this world that they can see, but not in color. I know a couple people, I have some friends that are colorblind, and there's viral videos going around right now of people that all of a sudden they get these special glasses where they can see color for the first time. And they're just so overwhelmed with emotion because they've never seen green grass or a blue sky before. And it's a whole new world that's been opened up to them. And then there's other people that they just can't see at all. And we encounter a person like that in our story this morning. We're at the very end of a series called Jesus Among Us. And we've taken a look through the Gospel of John in the New Testament where Jesus encounters different kinds of people. And the last one in our series that he encounters this morning is a man born blind. And we're in John chapter 9. And it starts off just like this. It says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? See, the disciples asked a fair question. In that day, if you were born with a sickness or disease or ailment of some kind, it was a belief that it was either because of a sin, it was a consequence of your sin, or a sin of a generation before you. And so the disciples, they were asking, was it his fault or was it his parents' fault that he was born blind? But Jesus, as he often did, he came to flip things upside down and to change the way that we see the world. And so Jesus answers, he says, it's not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. How perfect that Jesus says throughout the Gospel of John, he has a lot of I am statements. I am the bread of life. I am living water. How perfect that is as he's about to, spoiler alert, give sight to a blind man for the first time in his life. He says, I am the light of the world. He's about to heal this man born blind. He's about to allow him to see light for the first time ever. And Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Because throughout this chapter, there's not just a physical sight that this man gains, there's a spiritual sight. And there's this beautiful comparison that's made throughout this chapter between physical blindness and spiritual blindness. And how perfect and how appropriate that Jesus says, I'm the light of the world. Because this man's not just about to gain his physical sight, he's about to gain spiritual sight as well. One of my favorite quotes is from C.S. Lewis. It says, I believe in Christianity like I believe in the sun. Not just because I see it, but because by it, I see everything else. I can't think of a story that's a better representation of that quote. And so we continue in our story and Jesus heals him. He does it kind of weird though. He spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. Then he told them, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. I don't know why Jesus decided to do it this way. He spits on the ground, makes mud, and then he decides to put it all over the guy's eyes and sends him off to a pool. And imagine the emotion that this man feels at this moment. He just has Jesus put mud over his eyes. He goes out to a pool and he washes in the pool. And then he opens his eyes and for the first time in his life, he sees. Can you imagine if you could never see anything in your life before and all of a sudden We don't know how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're 15 or 50 years old. You open your eyes and you see for the first time everything in your life has changed. He looks up and he sees water for the first time. He sees trees for the first time. He sees people walking around for the first time. He sees the sky and the clouds and the grass for the first time. He looks in the pool that he just washed in. He can see his own reflection for the first time, his own hands and feet. He's never seen any of this before. His whole world changed. That's not how he expected his day to start. He didn't wake up that morning thinking, hey, I'm going to be able to see today. No, but everything changed. And here's what I love. He hadn't even seen Jesus yet. He hadn't seen Jesus yet. He didn't know where Jesus was at this point. But he had seen what Jesus had done, and that changed everything. But as soon as his world changed, the questions started coming at him. The next verse says, his neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. People that knew him and saw him day in and day out didn't actually believe his story, didn't believe it was him. They knew him, they recognized him, but they couldn't believe the miracle that had taken place in his life. As soon as Jesus changed his life, there were people that were doubting, they were skeptical about his new life. That's the way that it's going to be sometimes. When we make a decision to follow Jesus, there's going to be people that doubt it, that they're questioning it. They're not fully understanding what we're jumping into and what we're saying and the encounter that we've had with Jesus. But all this man knew was that he had an encounter with Jesus and nothing was the same anymore. And so these men continued asking him, and they couldn't quite make out if it was actually him or not. And so they decided to bring him before the Pharisees. The Pharisees was a group of religious leaders in that day and age, and they had it out for Jesus. They were not big fans of Jesus, and they tried everything they could to trap Jesus, and they thought they had an angle here because Jesus had actually healed this man on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day, going back to Old Testament law, the Sabbath day was one day a week that the Israelites, they weren't allowed to work. It was supposed to be a day of rest where they rested from the work that they had done. And it was a law that God gave. It was a good law for the people and a law that we should follow today. It was a good law for the people to be able to rest. And the law was meant to give life. But over time, they had added all these rules and regulations to this law that actually snuffed the life right out of the law. And so these Pharisees came and they were coming after Jesus because they said, hey, he broke our rule, he broke our law, we have an angle on him. But Jesus was actually fulfilling the law by giving life to this man on a day that was intended to bring life all along. But this man was brought before the Pharisees. Imagine the most intimidating group of people in town. That was the Pharisees. And this man, he had no education, no training in the law. He was a beggar. He sat on the side of the road and begged for a living. That was his life. That was his livelihood. And all of a sudden, he's brought into the Shark Tank in front of some of the most intimidating in town who start questioning him about what had happened. It says the Pharisees asked the man all about it, so he told them. He put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. I love how he just starts really basic. He just starts by stating the facts. He's still probably trying to figure out what exactly had happened, who this Jesus guy was, because he hadn't seen Jesus yet. And so he just simply states what happened. He's like, this is the facts. I was blind. He put mud on my eyes. I washed it away like he said, and then I could see stuff. And the Pharisees, they start arguing among themselves. Some of them said this man Jesus is not from God, for he's working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man. The second time they bring questions for him. They said, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? Imagine the pressure now escalates on this guy. This guy's had a really interesting couple days here. He wakes up blind, he's healed, he can all of a sudden see. Now he's brought before the Pharisees. They ask him just about the facts, but now they're asking his opinion on it. And you can kind of tell he's still not entirely sure of himself. He's still not entirely sure of who Jesus is, but he offers his best guess. It's like, hey, you guys asked my opinion? And so the man replied, I think he must be a prophet. He's not entirely sure. He has no education, no training in the law. But he says, hey, a guy healed my blindness. I've never been able to see. Now I can see. He has to be more than just a regular guy. And then things get kind of hysterical. Have you ever been in middle school and you're called into the principal's office and it gets so bad that they call your parents into the principal's office with you? That's happened. That's terrifying. What would be even weirder though is you're an adult and you get called into your boss's office and your boss calls your parents into the same office with you as you're an adult. I don't fully understand that, but all of a sudden the Pharisees, they need an extra witness, so they call his parents in to take testimony, and they call in and they ask for their opinion on the matter. And so the parents come in and they said, we know this is our son. They confirmed that. We know he was born blind. They confirmed that. But we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself. This man born blind is now left all alone. His neighbors doubted and were skeptical. His parents kind of just left him out to dry because his parents were afraid of the social consequences that would happen if they said, hey, this man Jesus that healed him, he has to be a prophet, he has to be of God. His parents were afraid of the social ramifications of this. And so they just left their son out to dry. They confirmed the facts. Yeah, he's our son. Yeah, he was born blind. We don't know what happened after that. And we're not going to say any more than that. So they leave him out to dry. So this guy is all on his own. But at some point around here, things start clicking for him. Rachel shared earlier about someone in Rooted that talked about things just started clicking when he was in community with other believers. And for different people, things start clicking at different points in time. Maybe it's when we're spending more time with other believers. Maybe it's when we're spending more time reading God's word or praying. And maybe it's just when we've hit a wall in life and we can't figure it out on our own anymore. That was what it was for me, where things just started clicking. At some point in time, things start clicking. And it started clicking for him because the Pharisees called him in a second time. They said, God should get the glory for this because we know this man Jesus is a sinner. And at this point, I feel like the guy's kind of had it. He was questioned by his neighbors. He's been questioned twice by the Pharisees all of a sudden. And now he's brought in. His parents left him out to dry. His own neighbors didn't recognize him. And he's left all alone. And you almost feel like he doesn't care about the social ramifications anymore. He doesn't care about the opinions of others because he knows his life has been turned upside down and things start clicking for him and becomes more bold and more unashamed about it. And he answers these guys with way more strength and way more boldness than he has before. He says, whether this man is a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. I love it. He says, I don't have all the answers. I don't know if this guy Jesus is a sinner or not. He says, I don't have all the answers that you're looking for. This is what I have. This is what I know, that though I was blind, now I see. People, we don't have to have all of the answers. I know I don't have all of the answers. There's been tons of times people have asked me questions and I simply say, I don't know. But this is what I do know, that though I was, now I am. He lays out the formula of what I believe every testimony of every follower of Jesus is. And yet the details of my story and his story and your story might look different. We followed different paths, but we followed the same basic formula, that though I was, now I am. That there's a point in time where we were before Jesus, and then Jesus entered the picture. We had an encounter with Jesus, just like this man born blind did. And then everything was different after that. That though I was blind, now I see. Though I was, now I am. It's this testimony of every follower of Jesus. If you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, you have this same story. You have this same testimony. And you don't have to have all the answers. You have that. And that is enough to share your faith, to stand boldly in your faith because you've encountered Jesus. Jesus has walked among you. And there's no greater thing than that. There's no greater story or testimony than that though I was, now I am. And it might be a different fill in the blank for each of us, that though I was rejected, now I am accepted. Though I was hopeless, now I'm hopeful. Though I was excluded, now I'm included. Though I was without purpose, now I'm on mission. Though I was addicted, now I'm open and I'm honest. I'm honest with myself and I'm honest with those around me about the things that I'm facing and struggling with. And though I was shamed, now I am honored. There's something that happens at the comma where we encounter Jesus, when Jesus has walked among us and we've met him, we've truly met him. And this guy, he met Jesus. He hadn't even seen Jesus, but he had seen all that Jesus had done. That he changed everything in his life, that though he was blind, now he could see. And nothing was ever the same. And he gains a new boldness. And like that quote by C.S. Lewis, he believed in Christianity like he believed in the sun, not just because he could see it, but because by it, he could see everything else. This man didn't just gain physical sight, he gained spiritual sight as well. That by this encounter with Jesus, he could now see everything more clearly. And he didn't have all the answers, but he had a story, he had a testimony, he had an encounter. Jesus had been among him and nothing was the same again. Though he was, now I am. And then he became visibly different. I love this. I love what happens next. He becomes visibly different. The Pharisees ask again, but what did he do? How did he heal you? Look, the man exclaimed, I told you once, didn't you? The man exclaimed, I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? I love that. He just starts getting sarcastic with them. Then they curse him and they said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. And then the man becomes visibly different. He becomes outrageously bold in who Jesus is. Not in his own powers or abilities, because he didn't do anything to heal his sight. If he could have done something to give himself sight, he would have done it long ago. But he becomes bold about who Jesus is. He says, why, that's very strange. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not have done it. There's a visible difference that happened in him. And then this man gets kicked out of the synagogue by the Pharisees. He was willing to stand firmly in his faith, because he couldn't help it, because Jesus had changed his life. He couldn't deny it. He could not deny who Jesus was. And forget the consequences, whatever they were, he was willing to stand in his faith. Are you willing to stand in your faith, in your testimony, in your story of what Jesus had done? And that though I was, now I am. Are you willing to boldly stand in that? Because for me, nothing's ever been the same. And when you stand in your faith, people will notice. They will take note. They will see a difference when you're living through that encounter you've had with Jesus. My wife works as a nurse. She's been a nurse for a couple years. And because of the way that the birth of our son fell, she's been on maternity leave throughout this crisis, but she returns to work tomorrow morning. But when she was at her first hospital, it was another big hospital in Philadelphia. She's a wonderful nurse. She's so loving and compassionate and intelligent. She just makes a great nurse. But she started feeling a conviction a couple months into her career of not just caring for her patients in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense. And she just felt a conviction that she should begin praying for, but also with her patients, which was a really bold step, to be able to ask patients if she could pray for them and to be able to ask them if she could pray with them at their bedside. But she felt a very strong conviction about doing that. And so she started with one, and she just started praying with and for her patients. And very few people, even if they don't believe in God, will refuse prayer when they're going through hard times. It's just what I found to be true. And so people would say yes, and she started regularly praying for and with her patients. And some of her coworkers started taking note of that. And this just would happen time and time again. And there came a time where there was another nurse on the unit, one of my wife's coworkers, that was taking care of a patient. And this patient asked her nurse, she said, "Is there someone that can pray for me?" And the nurse said, "Well, we don't have a chaplain here, but I know there's a nurse on our floor that will come and pray for you." And she went and got my wife. And this nurse didn't believe it. She's not a believer. She's not a follower of Jesus, but she knew who my wife was, and she knew what my wife stood for. My wife doesn't go into work carrying her Bible every day and all that stuff, but when asked, she boldly stands in her faith. She's not ashamed of who Jesus was, because she's had an encounter with Jesus that though she was, now she is. Jesus has changed everything in her life, and she boldly stands in that. And when you boldly stand in your story, in your testimony, when Jesus has walked among you, when you've truly encountered him, and he changes everything. It changes the way that you live, and it changes the way you see the world, and it changes the way the world sees you. Because God just doesn't help us see in the physical sense. He helps us see all things a little more clearly. Will you pray with me? Dear God, we thank you for this day, and God, we thank you that when we encounter you, nothing is ever the same. You change everything, and God, we believe in you like we believe in the Son, that not just because we see you, but because by you, we see everything else. And God, when we encounter you, you change everything. That God, though I was, now I am. Though I was rejected, now I'm accepted. Though I was shamed, now I am honored. And God, that's not because of anything that I did. It's because you've done the thing that I couldn't do. So God, we thank you for your sacrifice. We thank you for your love that is never ending, that is just always there for us, that takes us back time and time again. God, I pray that we would be a people that boldly stand in our faith. God, I pray that we'd be a people that remember what you have done in our life, that we remember our encounter with you, and that, God, you continuously walk among us. I pray we'd be a people who would not be ashamed of who you are, but you are the first thing that we think about, and that we would boldly share you when people have questions for the reason of the hope that's in us. We love you, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.
2, 1, 2, 3.
I saw the light, I saw the light. No more in darkness, no more in night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow in sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I wandered so aimless, life filled with sin. I wouldn't let my fear save in. Then Jesus came like a stranger in that night. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light. I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm
I believe in Jesus like I believe in the sun, not just because I see it, but because by it, I see everything else. Today, I pray that you see the world more clearly and experience Jesus' love more deeply. If you have not texted us yet to learn more about 938, you can use the number on the screen and text new to 938 to the number 97000. And if you haven't yet, please sign up and join me in a few moments for Meet 938. You can go to the link on the screen or in the chat feature where you and others can meet a few of our team members. If you'd like to give to Project 938, you can go to give938.net and you can be a part of helping people find their way back to God. Now for everyone, I want to invite you to join us next week where we will begin a new series talking about our vision to flourish. We believe that in the darkest soils, the brightest flowers emerge. Over the next 6 weeks, our series will be called We Flourish. We will cast vision for how we as a church will make the most of the moment we are in to grow our faith and to see one another and our community flourish. Thanks for being here. See you next week.